Welcome to another edition of Real Talk with Real People, a candid conversation with Dr. Karoline Bethea-Jones. I am Dr. Karoline Bethea-Jones, your host for this broadcast, and today my guest is musician Alban Jones Sr., but he goes by AJ to his friends, so welcome AJ to the show. How are you?
I'm awesome. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. You know, during this COVID invasion, we're all handling things, I think, very nicely. I'm doing good.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, first, I want to say thank you for allowing me to interview you. And before I get into any questions, I believe that my audience would like to know a little bit more about you. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you are here today?
Well, by day, I'm that classic utility worker. I've been working for 39 years with the company. But by night, equally as long, I've always had my hand dabbled in music. Started out as a listener, as everyone did. Then I started DJing, and then I became a musician where I started to play drums, keyboards, to the point where I had my own band for 10 years and played in a bunch of other bands during that process. But one of the things I've always done is written my own music. And for some strange reason, over the course of my life, I never released it. And finally, with this COVID happening and shutting us inside, it started changing the way I was working. I started really pulling these things out and fleshing them out. And I said, this is the perfect opportunity for me to drop my own project. So here I am.
So, how long have you been making music?
Does stuff like this count?
Well,
I've been doing that since I was a kid.
okay, well, how long would you say that you've been actually considering yourself a musician and actually putting out, not even putting out, but just forming music in your own way? For how long?
I would say, honestly, I would have to look probably when I started DJing. So I got serious about DJing in 1979, my senior year of high school, right around that time when classic hip hop kicked off. I should say classic, the birth of hip hop. Wasn't classic yet, it's classic now. But have an opportunity, have access to records and turntables and mics and cassette decks was that first foray where I got an opportunity to stop listening to those folks who were doing it and started being able to create my own stuff, even though I was using their material.
Okay, so in terms of how long? Over 10 years, over 20 years, over 30 years, over 40 years,
Well,
over 50 years?
Seeing that my birthday, I'll be 60.
Okay.
And 79, I was just about getting ready to turn 20. I'd say 40 years.
Okay, all right, that's a long time, okay? So you've been making music for well over 40 years, we'll say. So why did you decide to put out this body of music at this particular time in your life?
Well, it's crazy. It's a couple things. It's number one, like I've always, done my own thing, and I've dropped them here and there to friends so they could hear it, and responses are varied. Had a couple projects that were like awesome, had a couple projects that really sucked, and when your friends tell you they suck, you kind of go, y'all know what you're talking about, my music is good.
All right.
But at this particular time, as I said, I just, my band, we did our last show July of 2019 after a 10-year run, so we took a hiatus, and now I had all this free time on my own. One of the funny things is that being in a band, we were a cover band, so we never did our own original music. My son is my music director, and he's been releasing his own music for years. He probably got about 10, 15 CDs out on his own that he's released. And he kept saying to me, Dad, you need to release your project. Dad, you need to release, Dad. So part of this is a tribute to him because he saw how I was working, and I'm one of them old school guys, having come up the old way, and he keeps dragging me into this new way of working, the way folks work today, using audio files. I come from the MIDI world and live instrumentation, and he really showed me I could take the best of all those worlds, blend it together, and do the thing I love to do. So a big part of this is him kind of pushing me down that road. And it was the perfect storm. When COVID hit, buying a couple pieces of new gear, really taking these songs, fleshing them out, going back and grabbing a couple of songs that I love, adding a couple of new things that I created. And, 2020 became that perfect storm for me to go ahead and release this project.
Okay, is this a special project or is this the first of many?
It's special because obviously it's the first. Anytime it's the first of something, it's special. But if I drop this and I like it, and I don't even need a good reception from the rest of the world, it's that kind of self-gratification for yourself, knowing that you have a voice inside of you that has been screaming to get out. And finally, let's let that voice get out and let it do what it do. So once I drop this first one, my plan is probably by June of 2021, I'll drop a second project just to keep that energy and excitement going.
Okay, great. Now, the music business has changed in the last 40 years. So, has the music business become harder to get into, or is it relatively easier? What are your opinion?
That's a double-edged sword. So let me answer it this way. It has gotten easier from where I sit as a musician, because back in the old days, when you needed to get yourself out there, you had to get your following together, you had to get your material together, then you had to go to a label, you had to be signed to a label in order for your product to be distributed. And then this wonderful thing came along called the internet. And when the internet came along, not only did the internet come along, but technology started changing so rapidly that I started out with 8-tracks. I remember listening to my parents' 8-tracks. My favorite 8-track was Parliament Funkadelic. I can't even believe this thing was on the 8-track, okay? Then when the cassette world came along, well, actually, let me back up, because it was always vinyl. Vinyl was always king. So you had vinyl, you had albums, you had 45s. Then the 8-track made it portable, because you could not carry your vinyl with you. When they put 8-track in the car, that was the best thing that ever happened. All of a sudden, cassettes came along. Cassettes took the outdated 8-track, put it into a much more common, compact package, to the point where they came up with the Walkman, where you could carry your music with you.
That's right.
So that's the technology going along, and then all of a sudden the CD revolution hit. And when CD came, it was the perfect thing, because when you made a cassette, every time you made a copy of it, and over the years, that cassette would degrade. But if you made a CD, that CD sounded as good 10 years later as it did when you made it, and it was an exact digital representation of the product you did. And then here comes the next wave, which is MP3 and all these digital files, and that's next level. And the best thing about that is when you had to carry your CD Walkman with you, you had to carry that unit, and you had to carry a box of CDs with you. Okay. Now with your digital files, on your personal cell phone, you can carry as many songs as you choose to. You're sitting in my studio, look at all the CDs I have. I can take my whole collection, clip it to my phone, and walk around and take it everywhere I want to go. And it's perfect. It never changes.
Exactly. Now, with all this new innovation happening all around us, if you could change anything about the industry, what would it be?
Wow, that's a simple question for me. And this is the thing that breaks my heart more than anything. The arts in general, okay? We have to live, we have to survive, we don't eat, we don't do the work that we do. We just can't sustain ourselves. But there's this thing called the arts. And what the arts does for the human race is it has this amazing, incredible ability to uplift mankind. And what you see now is, because we're such a microwavable society, I'm trying to find that word. It's the value, I guess, is one of the best words for it. People don't value the artists like they used to value the artists. Back in the day, if Stevie Wonder rolled through your town, or Aretha Franklin, you know what I mean? Any of the big rock guys, when they rolled through your town, man, it was a huge thing. And now today, because people, they don't even want to pay you for your work. They want your friend to buy the CD. They buy the CD for $10. They make a copy of it and they give it to you. So you cut the artist out of that revenue stream that would sustain them. So now you're taking the art and you're devaluing the art because you don't value the artist. I wish we would go back to valuing the artist. And I don't just mean in music. I'm talking about, writing. I'm talking about any of those things where you have to be creative to make it happen.
All the mediums.
Yeah, man, that breaks my heart. But you know what? It won't stop me from being a musician, because that's what I love to do.
Okay. Who are your musical influences? Why don't you share that with us?
How much time we got?
Well, we have a bit of time, so,
Let me tell you, first and foremost, all my friends will tell you, hands down, without question, it's Prince. Nobody has put a stamp on me the way Prince has. And I say that with a lot of love, because people expect that I would then, in turn, be a clone of Prince. And that's not what it is. The reason I admire Prince, as much as I admire Prince for his musical aplomb, and the man truly was a genius. We throw that word around lightly, but there is no throwing around when you talk. If you don't believe me, go Google Prince and click on the first video clip you see, and I guarantee it'll knock your socks off. That's how much, how prolific this man was.
Yeah.
But it wasn't his music that's the first thing that grabbed me, because that's the very first thing I heard, and the very first thing I heard was I Want to Be Your Lover, and it was his second album at that time. I heard that song and I was like, okay, I kind of like this. And next thing you know, it blew up, it came out, you know, and people started paying attention to him. But there was a song on that record called Sexy Dancer. When I heard Sexy Dancer, I lost my mind. It was funky, it was tight. The I Want to Be Your Lover was pop. This thing was funky. And I said, who is this? And they said it was Prince. I was like, nah, it can't be that same guy. I ran to the record store, I brought that record. And let me tell you, I came home, put it on, loved it so much, I wore that thing out like over 3 weeks. I ran back to the record store, and I said, hey man, does this guy got anything else out? And then I got Prince's first album. And from that day forward, I was a bona fide Prince fan. But the reason I say I love him is the music, of course, is amazing, but it's his vision as an artist. It's the way he delivered his product. It's the vision he had for himself as a human being. He built Paisley Park. A lot of artists take their money, smoke it up, you know, do all this incredible stuff. He built a complex where he literally did not need the record label because he could do everything. He could record, he could compose, he could shoot his own videos there, he could do a movie there, he had a sound stage. He truly saw beyond just being an artist. And he also was a benefactor to a lot of artists coming up, because when he had his fight with his label and the things he went through, he didn't want artists to have to go through what he went through. So a lot of artists he mentored on the side, he donated a lot of money to a lot of special projects that he didn't want people to know about, and only in his death did you hear all the things that he did. So his music was just amazing, but when you peel back all the layers and look at the man himself, I love who the man was. So it's more than music with me when it comes to Prince. So he's my favorite artist.
I can
hands
see
down,
that. Yes,
okay?
yes.
But I grew up on all the funk bands. You know, George Clinton needs to get George Clinton should never have to work a day in his life. George Clinton should be, you know, propped up like the Pope, you know, like the president, because George Clinton revolutionized an industry. James Brown was the architect of funk, and other people will dispute that because they'll say funk came in, you know, people before James. But when I talk about these people, these are the people who, when you say their name, you immediately identify them with the style and what they brought to the table.
Right.
James Brown did that. And what George Clinton did is he heard James, and he snatched Bootsy from James, and he took that thing and he put it on steroids, and then he added all these incredible elements to it. And George Clinton is just an amazing person in my life, because all those funk bands that came out in the early 70s up through the 80s, I loved all of them. Pleasure, Cameo, oh God, Brass Construction, you know, we could go on and on naming all these amazing bands.
Right.
And then when you talk about a band that to me is just, if you ever aspire to be a band, you want to be Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Okay.
Earth, Wind, and Fire had wrote some of the most amazing music in the history of music. The vision that Maurice White had for that camp that he put together, a couple of his brothers and some people that he got together, the vision, his whole, you know, using symbolisms and making sure that when he delivered a stage show, let's put it to you this way, you didn't ever want to follow Earth, Wind, and Fire. You wanted to go on before them, because if you went on after them, the people was leaving with Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Right.
They were smoking everybody. And a little bit of everything. I love rock music, I love classical music. I got influences and idols across the whole spectrum of music, but those are the folks I love the most. And then as a musician, as a drummer, my favorite drummer is a man named Dave Weckl. I discovered him through Chick Corea, and Dave is still out there doing his thing. He probably released 10, 12 of his own CDs, and I got every single one of them, okay? Because he is just amazing. I just love instrumental